So kids protection planning, that's the theme of what we're talking about here. Planning for lifetime protection, guidance, and love. One of the first questions we have comes up on the next slide. It's really one of the bigger questions. Grant, I mean, what is, as parents of young kids, has this question ever come up with you, your spouse?
Yeah, absolutely. I think where we stopped short for far too long was what initially was a disagreement of, which extended relative or which family member is best suited to raise our kids if something happened to us, to even once that became an agreement on who that couple should be for us. It wasn't put in writing. It wasn't made clear. We took too long to inform those people. And I think Ben and I both ultimately arrived at maybe some of our personal decisions for our immediate family. I think we each have 3 kids, all minors, and it wasn't maybe the most traditional decision.
Yeah.
It wasn't maybe you don't default to my parents east of Dallas or my brother in Fort Worth. Might surprise some folks that it is non-blood relative family that we would choose. And what I think we've had countless clients at this point now that have felt the same, and that's important. It's just kind of that's why you need a custom plan.
Yeah, one of the things I think commonly happens, my wife and I have experienced it. You're about to leave for a trip. Maybe we're going to get on a plane and go to Cancun or go across the country. Our kids are staying behind with nannies, babysitter, grandparents. And so the question comes up, okay, have we ever expressed to anybody who we want to be guardians? Have we ever written anything down? Is anything enforceable? Would a court, if this went before a judge, would they know who we want or don't want to raise our kids? So all things that want to take care of, looking at short-term and long-term guardians. These are both considerations that we want to think about. So short-term, what are some important things there, Grant? What do you think?
Accessibility. One of the way we explain this in our meetings together, when you're looking at short-term guardians, it is not the usual meaning of the word guardian. We're talking about who can be at the house or at where the kids usually are during the day or in the evenings, who can be there in 15, 20 minutes. It could be a neighbor down the street. It could be a close family friend. Maybe across town is your best option, and that's fine. Here in Wichita Falls, we can get anywhere in 10 minutes. That's a heck of a lot better than if, let's say, use my folks as an example, in Forney, Texas. If I had them as my long-term guardians for my children, well, it's going to be 2.5, 3 hours at the soonest they could be there. And so short-term designations or in the immediate, say, something happened to my wife and I, use a car wreck example, not even necessarily, I'm not, even if we had not passed away, we're just unavailable, inaccessible, incapacitated for whatever reason. These are the folks that you want to identify then. Reason being, getting there quickly, you're avoiding, even ever so briefly, maybe state custody of your kids until they figure out who is supposed to care for these children in the immediate future. Long-term guardians, this is something that wills and estate plans should always address, even if it's a one-line mention. We go into far greater depth than just that. But long-term guardians, this is where it changes a little bit. If they're out of state, if they're across, if they're a few hours away, that's okay. This is that long-term planning where you've given a lot of thought to who do you want to raise your kids if you can't any longer.
One of the things about a will is traditionally you'll draft a will and it'll talk about your property, and you'll usually have some paragraphs or statements about who we'd like to be as guardians for our children. But a will only comes into effect after somebody passes away. But what if somebody's in a crash or an accident and they're just incapacitated? They're in the hospital. You still can't take care of your kids, but you still need guardians. And so your will is not going to come into effect. And so I don't know if everybody can see my camera. So in a estate plan, for example, when we draft one, it's in a portfolio. This is like a trust plan, estate plan that includes wills and everything. But a kids protection plan, we do a separate portfolio with a lot of the guardian documents that we're talking about today. But it's caregiver instructions, emergency guardians, long-term guardians, healthcare. And so something like this can be beneficial and step in, even if a person's not been, they're not deceased, but they're just incapacitated. So that's why it's important to look at all these types of things.
Yeah.
And looking at your assets, the next slide
Here we go.
touches on that. So, short-term, long-term guardians, but your money. So if and when you do pass, and you have minor kids, how will they receive your assets?
Notably, and Ben and I unfortunately have come across this a couple times here within the last 6 or 8 months. If your children, if minor children are set to take, whether it be life insurance, inheritance, there's not an entity out there that can just go cutting a check to someone under the age of 18. And so there's a common kind of a myth or something that's just said far too often, that's really, there's no truth to it at all, that only wealthy people need an estate plan. Whether it's $1,000, $100,000, or $1 million, whatever is there that we're able to leave to our children, you want it to be accessible, maybe not blanket access either. We don't want want to give some one specific story. A grandmother meaning well by this, and her life insurance left 50% of it to a minor child grandkid. And so the parents came to us and showed us this letter from an insurance company that says, here's what we're going to do unless you find a judge to tell us otherwise. We're going to hold on to this money, and when this 12-year-old turns 18, we'll cut him a check for the whole thing. Well, that's not good either. And we can get into this later, and this is something best suited for customizing for, in a meeting, kind of one-on-one. But it's very common that I mean, we're huge fans of structuring out payments and not accessible funds before 18 as needed for appropriate reasons. And also maybe let's taper out distributions past 18 as well, because we were all 18 once, and could always maybe use a little bit of a backstop, and maybe not just a huge check from an insurance company in the mail on our 18th birthday.
Yeah. If you do no planning at all, the default plan for the state, any state of Texas, state of Oklahoma, anywhere, is the probate process. And maybe that's not terrible. Maybe that can take care of things, but it is a default. And if you do have no will, no planning, there's a formula in the estates code that determines where your assets go. Sometimes if there's only a spouse and there's no kids, that might be real straightforward. But if you have children and you're leaving a home, then you have part of the home going to a spouse, maybe for the rest of their life, thirds of that going to kids. If you have a mixed family of stepkids and remarriage and those sorts of things, it can get pretty complicated. And so one way we look at probate is it's a lawsuit you file against yourself with your own money for the benefit of your creditors, primarily to make sure that you don't owe money to people that slips through the cracks. And so there are ways to avoid probate and avoid some of that. So that goes along with kids protection planning.
Absolutely. Getting into the kind of the details of, Ben held up a moment ago, and I should have stopped screen sharing sooner. I don't know if that was visible to everyone. His estate plan, his complete plan is a good, would you say, Ben, about an inch thick of all these ancillary documents. He has a trust, a pour-over will, all this other stuff. The kids protection plan is a thinner portfolio that's it's a companion to it, and it's one of the a critical piece to this, whether it's not just probate avoidance, it's the goal as best we can for any given family is get things on autopilot, provide this roadmap for our loved ones. If something happens to us, here's how to approach everything, every aspect of life that we can possibly think of. Here's what we want for our kids and how to handle it. So in this kind of just walks through things that addresses, as we touched on a moment ago, choose the right long-term guardians. So we'll have that discussion. And we have a husband and a wife, or we have two spouses in a meeting together. We will help provide some suggestions and guidance to choose the right people, the best fit. Short-term guardians, like we already addressed, could be different people. They could be the same people. And that's always, of course, a blessing if you're able to do that. You want to be able to tell your guardians, you want to be able to advise them and provide them with tangible documents in their hands that address incredible detail on what your wishes are, but where to find detailed instructions, where to find my complete estate plan and this kids protection plan. And this note off to the side here is something else that we do. We'll equip you with a emergency ID card that we suggest you keep in your wallet or on your person, however you wherever you keep your debit cards and whatnot. If something has happened to me, if I'm incapacitated, here are the emergency contacts. Here are the people, and it's going to be your short-term guardians, and how they can be reached, and they'll know where your kids are.
One of the important things to have with kids protection planning is medical powers of attorney. So not just for mom and dad, but for the kids, we're going to create medical powers of attorney for each child. One example was we had a family just a week or two ago that the kids were going to take off and go skiing with the grandparents in New Mexico. And so mom and dad are going to stay here. Well, they took the kids' medical powers of attorney with them because, as commonly happens in the ski slope, if somebody tweaks a knee or breaks an ankle or something and they have to go to the hospital, they have the kids' medical powers of attorney, and the grandparents are designated as agents in those powers of attorney. So they could go get ER care or whatever and not have any issue with making those decisions. So those are all things that can be done ahead of time and not run into emergency situations that prevent proper care. Healthcare guidance. So the healthcare powers and the documents should talk about, like on number 5 there, pediatricians, who are their doctors, who are their dentists, medications, allergies, backup contacts, and also for guardianship designations, excluding anyone you would never want to raise your kids. Sometimes in a family that's not an issue, but then we come across situations where that is, and they say, you know what, these are the people we choose, but under no circumstances or do we want Cruella de Vil over here or whoever this person is raising our kids. And so what we can do is we can actually draft a confidential exclusion of guardian, and it's not something that person even has to know about. You can keep it in your estate plan confidentially. And what could happen is, let's say you passed or you were incapacitated and that person reared their head and said, I want custody of these kids. That document could then be produced and try to avoid embarrassment, but still effectively prevent the person you didn't want to take custody.
And on the other end of the spectrum on there's also a way to be inclusive of folks that you want to, maybe they're not the designated long-term guardian, but you want to ensure that, it's a family friend or it's a relative, maybe out-of-state relative or something like that. You can clearly state your wishes within the kids protection plan. Please include these people in my kids' lives if I'm, no longer around to ensure that it happens. That could definitely be if you've got, whether it's on the, the in-law side of the family, and maybe by default, you can't be totally sure that it'll happen without that request. There's an opportunity to make those wishes known as well. There's a couple things that and these bullet points don't really do these documents justice when it comes to just how in depth a lot of these things can be addressed. But we separated these out just to explain these today, at least for values and financial roadmaps, kind of as two separate things here. But what church would you like your kids to continue to be members of, or what community involvement or nonprofits, or what are your what reflects your values best with how you wish them to continue to be raised. It can get into which holidays to celebrate and how. Approach to discipline. Are there things that are always unacceptable? Are there things that time and place that are acceptable? The financial roadmap is a bit separate with, even though it's covered in the same document, you'll get into, you know, opportunities to really write out where are the financial resources? How are they accessible? Are you big fans of a weekly or monthly allowance, or are there savings goals, or there's creative ways now in embracing tech with, you know, giving minors a debit card at a certain age to learn about, you know, financial health, and educational priorities are another one, where you just kind of state your values and your wishes. And then lastly, as we've said a couple times now, this really, the kids protection plan is ideal. It's most effective when it accompanies an all-encompassing estate plan. And so, you know, securing your financial resources intelligently, whether, and it's commonplace for us to reach out to a client's CPA, to reach out to their financial advisor, investment managers. We want to all be on the same page here, but securing these financial resources, and ideally having them in a trust with structure and with guardrails and guidance on when are things accessible and how, and just making sure that it's, you're really actually protecting your kids.
I can't think of any situation where I wouldn't recommend some kind of trust for minors, whether that's drafting a will for the parents and having a testamentary trust created in the will if the parents pass away, or a living trust that's created while you're alive and you put all your assets into, that makes sure that if you still have minor kids, that they don't just inherit money outright, because unless they're 18, they can't. And plus, you don't want 18, 19, 20-year-olds inheriting large amounts of money, whether it's life insurance or savings or whatever. So next slide there is just asking a question. What can you do today to do the right thing for your family? And so that's just kind of an ultimate question. We talked about costs here. So costs are always considerations, always things to think about. At the top there, we talk about the cost of no planning, which is greater in a lot of situations than doing planning. But we've got probate filing fees, so just initiating probate. And again, probate is after somebody dies, and this is the court process. There are ways with trust planning to avoid probate altogether, but you'll have attorney's fees. So no planning is going to involve these costs. Executor fees, lengthy delays in court, a big risk of family conflict, and big fear of the unknown. So avoidance techniques, or just not trying to think about it or stick your head in the sand, is no planning, and it guarantees fear, unknown, high risk of conflict, and lots of fees. On the converse, planning, fees and that sort of thing, we work on a flat fee basis personally here at our firm, but we value a kids protection plan. A lot of the documents that we're talking about around 500, but it usually, when we're doing it practically, it usually accompanies a will plan for a family or a living trust plan. So that cost is usually absorbed in the wills and everything that we're doing with the family, though a kids protection plan can be done separately. But
yeah, we did our best here. These are just kind of averages you'll see at the bottom with kind of the ranges of what to expect. But critically, the meeting, planning session that we have with a new client, and this will go into more depth here on the next slide, the next couple slides. But a planning session together is very educational. We've done our homework. We've looked at what you've provided us. We make recommendations and are able to then quote the fee. There's no surprises, flat fee. There's no, we're not starting a stopwatch or anything when you call with questions. But we like to be very, very black and white on how much it'll cost for what we're quoting and work through that together. For participating today, for attending today, we would like to provide a $250 credit on the quoted fee that would happen at that meeting. If you just you don't have to schedule it, you don't have to show up to a meeting today. Just schedule it and get it on the books with us, and we'd love to be able to meet with you and of course provide that credit.
The
So
way,
kind of, yeah.
oh, sorry, Grant. The way our process works is if you're ready to schedule a meeting, you just contact us, whether that's email, phone, whatever. Beth is our client services director, and she'll help schedule that meeting. We block off up to 2 hours because it is a working meeting. It's and the second part of that, the complete, is an online secure questionnaire that you fill out, and you're able to put in your personal and your kind of general asset information. So we have that before that meeting, so we can sit down and not waste your time or ours by trying to collect information or data. We can sit down and start talking about your family and really get into it and develop a plan. And if it looks like something you want to do, then we move forward and we figure out exactly what type of plan you want, what that's going to cost, and whether you can pay, half at that time, or you need to extend it out and make some payments. We work with people on that. So the last part there.
Yeah. This is the end goal, the end result here is peace of mind. We're well aware, anyone looking at kids protection planning has young kids. We never know what's in store for any of us with our future. And that unknown doesn't have to be scary. You can have a tremendous amount of peace of mind knowing, as best humanly possible, you want things on autopilot. If something happens to you or your spouse or your other children's, your kid's guardian, you have a plan in order. So, take advantage of this, the $250 credit. Let this educational meeting, it's definitely, we can see the relief on our clients' faces. We cover a lot in the meeting, but it's stuff that just most days it goes undiscussed between spouses. Parents of young kids don't like to what if about some of these things, but it's incredibly important. And once it's done, and let us, we will periodically reach out. At the very least, we're calendaring out a few years to touch base with all of our clients, all of our estate planning clients, check in, look at, what's changed with asset ownership, investments, kids' ages, the birth of a new child, those major life developments. It goes back to just the importance to Ben and I that your plan reflects your wishes, and life is messy and things change and things, it's not just the same year over year over year. And so we don't want to just hand you a stack of documents. Thanks, bye. No, we want to be part of your family's life and as helpful as possible, for years to come.
Yeah. For any follow-up questions, the easiest way to do that is call our office, or you can email Beth at hooverrogers.com or info@hooverrogers.com. We schedule a 15-minute free phone call, and we can answer any questions that people have about kids protection planning, estate plans. Do I need a will? Would I benefit from a trust? Powers of attorney, all those types of things. We'll answer those questions. And then if you're ready to schedule a meeting, again, we schedule that on the calendar we block off 2 hours. We ask for both spouses to be there so that we can really talk about what we need to. So thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And when we post this, we again encourage people to call or with any questions, and we're happy to answer those. So thanks for your time today.